Hey everyone, welcome back to the NPTE podcast. This is Will Crane, your host. Thank you so much for joining me as we go through the content you need in order to dominate on test day. So today I've got a great episode for you. We're going to be talking about the 2024 NPTE updates and changes. So as I record this, we just finished up the final 2023 NPTE, meaning that now on to January 2024, we will be beginning the new 2024 NPTE updates or in 2024 NPTE content outline. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Before I get to that, just a quick note here. So I guess this is more than just a quick note, but one of our corporate sponsors, Athletico and Pivot, they are sponsoring a one-day in-person NPTE prep course. This would be free to you. It's going to be held in Chicago, Illinois. So you just have to get yourself to Chicago. They are providing the meals, the parking, and the gas totally free of cost. All you have to do is apply. There are limited seats, so I anticipate that the registration will fill up very, very quickly. So as soon as you can, go over to ptfinalexam.com/podcast, where you'll be able to subscribe. Make sure to get on the email list. We'll also be sending out an email flyer as well, so you'll be able to register for this easily. But the easiest way to get to it, just go over to any of our socials, or you can find it at ptfinalexam.com/podcast. That's where you can register for this in-person event. It's going to be held on Saturday, November 18th. It's an all-day event from 8 to 5 p.m. And then be sure, again, this is super great. You'll be able to not only get the NPTE content, but also they're providing, like I say, meals, parking, gas provided for the registrants. You need to make sure to register because the seats do fill up very quickly. So be sure to register. You can find that at ptfinalexam.com/podcast to be able to register for that. So again, that's November 18th coming up on a Saturday in November. You'll be able to register. That'll be a ton of fun. We'll do that in Chicago. So today our goal is to talk through the NPTE updates that are coming for 2024. So as you recall, maybe some of you are familiar, some of you are not. The FSBPT, the Federation of State Boards of PT, so all of the boards across the United States, all the jurisdictions, they come together and they determine what is going to be on the NPTE. Now, the way they determine the precise quantity, it's based on what's called a practice analysis. All that means is that they get a wide variety, get survey data from all across every jurisdiction in the United States to determine what a first year or entry-level PT is likely to encounter in their first year of practice. And so from that practice analysis stems the FSBPT's content outline. So talking about the content outline, I'll show you the image here, but I just want to point out that so those of you watching the YouTube version of this, you'll be able to easily see the image. I'll be describing some of the key changes that came about in 2024. So the good news is that it really didn't change a lot of the proportions, meaning that you still need to study cardio-musculo neuro. That's about 75% of the test. Each of the other systems is represented in a very minor way. So integumentary has somewhere between 8 and 11 questions. The genitourinary system, somewhere between 2 and 5 questions. So again, these other systems are not particularly large. The non-systems remained about the same. Really, the biggest change is that the total quantity or the absolute number of questions on the test has been reduced. Now, why would you say, you'd probably be asking yourself, why would they reduce the number of questions? Well, that's because they introduced something called scenario-based items. So I'll be talking about that a little bit more, but the key with scenario-based items is that they will give you a singular scenario, much like a patient chart. I'll show you what the standard format looks like here in just a moment, but they'll give you a standard or a patient chart, and in that patient chart, you will be given a large quantity of information. Then they will ask you several questions related to that patient scenario. Now, when it comes to scenario-based items, the good news is that these scenario questions are not built upon each other, meaning you don't have to get one right in order to get the next one correct. Really, they're independent in the sense that one question will ask you about the assistive device, and the next question will ask you about target interventions for the ankle plantar flexion or something, meaning that you will have, certainly it's all related to the case, but they're not cumulative or summative questions that would then be building upon each other in order to answer them correctly. So in a sense, beginning in January 2024, you can expect a reduction in the total number of items. So previously it was 250. Again, those of you listening to this as you're preparing for 2024, it's somewhat irrelevant what it used to be, so what the 2023 outline was. However, that being said, you need to know what is going to occur or what you'll experience on January of 2024 and beyond. Each of these content outlines, by the way, they last about 5 years at a time. So I anticipate that between January 2024 and January 2029 is when this content outline will be valid. Now, that being said, there could be things that could occur which would postpone that. For instance, COVID postponed this change by a year. So previously, the change was going to occur through 2022 and begin in 2023. But again, COVID delayed everything. So all things considered, there is a possibility of delay, but chances are this content outline and this format of the test will exist for the next 5 years. So those of you listening to this podcast way down the line, you'll be able to say, okay, yeah, this is still clearly valid as we head in through the next 5 years or so onto the content outline that will occur after that. Anyway, point being that in January 2024, you can expect a change in the NPTE. So what does that look like? Well, the big change is that reduction in the number of items in order to accommodate these scenario-based questions. So just to put it in terms of how many questions, you'll have 225 items total. So that means 180 scored items and 45 unscored items for the PT exam for that grand total of 225. Now, this is an interesting statement. They put up to 45 scenario-based items. So that doesn't mean 45 scenarios. That means 45 scenario-based questions. So ostensibly, each scenario would have somewhere around 3 to 5 questions on it. So that means you'd expect somewhere around, 7 scenarios. Again, there's some variability there. Plus, they point out that it's up to 45 scenario items. So it could be that they only have 30, they could only have 15. 45 would be the maximum number of test questions related to scenarios. For the PTA exam, that number is up to 35 scenario-based items. So again, those of you who are watching the YouTube version of this, you'll be able to easily see the numbers that I'm describing. But just to put it in a nutshell, the total number of items you'll expect on the NPTE for PTs is 225 items. 45 of those are unscored, and about 45 of those are scenario-based items. So that doesn't mean that all the scenario-based items are unscored. The scored items could be up to 45 scenario-based items, 180 total scored items. And just as a quick reminder, on test day, there are a number of pre-test or unscored items that you'll experience. And what that means is that they are testing them out to determine if people who pass the test get them right, people who fail the test get them wrong. They're using what's called the item response theory of psychometric data in order to analyze whether or not a question is a valid question, if it's miskeyed, if there's something wrong about it. That's how they roll those out. So there's no way to determine or distinguish in any way a scored item from an unscored item. So you as the test taker, you just have to take every item as if your life depended on it. So I guess you get to be the unwitting guinea pig when it comes to testing out these items. That being said, it does help the next administration and the next administration. So I guess you can assuage your conscience by saying, okay, I'm helping future generations of PTs by being the test subject for these unscored items. But that being put aside, again, 225 items total, 45 are unscored, 180 that are scored. Up to 45 scenario-based items. Again, that's up to 45. There could be fewer than that. The PT time continues to be 5 hours with 5 sections of questions. So that remains unchanged. You still have 5 hours to go through 5 sections of questions, ostensibly 45 questions per section. So that being said, the timing is just over a minute per item. So really, I guess closer to a minute and a half per item. You still need to be moving along quite quickly. I tell people that you need to be finishing each section in approximately 1 hour. Now, there is a lot of give or take there. You get the 5-hour time bank to use as you wish, but you would ideally hit each section in about 1 hour. And so I tell people, try to hit each half section in about a half hour, and that'll keep you on a really good pace to make sure that you will finish in time to complete the entire exam. The scoring remains the same. You still require a 600 out of 800 score. So again, I anticipate we've not seen the 2024 exam results come out yet. We're recording this here at the end of October in 2023, but that would still be equivalent to approximately a 67 to 69% on test day. So a 600 out of 800 scale score. The cost remains about the same. So we're talking about $485 for PTs for both, $485 for PTs and PTAs. It's the Prometric cost that's slightly different, about $100 for PTs and $82 for PTAs, just because the PTA exam is only 4 hours instead of 5 hours. Anyway, all that to say, you'll find that as you go through this process, each step, there's another fee. So every time you take a step, you have to pay a fee. So when you apply at your state, you have to pay a fee. When you register with FSBPT, you have to pay a fee. When you register with Prometric, you have to pay a fee. You'll see that theme continues and persists as you go through this entire process. So when it comes to the scenarios, I just wanted to point out the typical scenario format. Now, they do give themselves some leeway that it could be somewhat off, either adding or changing some of these category headings. But just to list what you would expect in a scenario, much like a patient chart, you'd have the settings. So we're talking like outpatient or inpatient, the sex of the patient, meaning male, female, the age of the patient, talking about whether or not, they're a child, they're a middle adult, an older adult, adolescent. All of that would be helpful information as you are assessing what the condition or what the scenario is. So we've got setting, sex, age, followed by the presenting problem or current condition and pertinent medical history. So they'll talk about presenting problem, left total knee arthroplasty with quadricep weakness or something like that, with a medical history that would include the total knee arthroplasty, previous knee surgeries, any other information such as like if they have multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, something like that could show up there in the medical history, as well as other information. Then you get to examination data and the physical therapy plan of care. So the examination data, that would tell you what the manual muscle tests were, any of the special tests, any functional outcome measures. All those things would then be listed in the examination data. And then the plan of care would indicate, okay, yes, we are indeed attempting to lower extremity strengthening, gait training, balance training, something as far as what the plan is when it comes to PT, talking about what the intervention strategy is going to be for this patient. Now, again, not every question will have every one of these scenario bullet points. However, it would be very similar to a patient chart, meaning that each patient chart is going to tell you the patient's name, age, presenting diagnosis, history, all of that information in order to craft a clear or full picture of the patient. So when it comes to answering scenario items, just a few key tips as we conclude here. How can you prepare for these new scenario items that are coming up in 2024? So over at PT Final Exam, we've been writing tons and tons of these scenario-based items. All of this is based off of the FSBPT's content outline. They have some demo or demonstration scenario items that are available publicly. And so as far as I get the question all the time, well, Will, where do you guys come up with your questions? Well, we have to craft them based on current content. So we use current textbooks. We base them on the FSBPT's content outline, as well as the demonstration or demo items that are presented or publicly available. And then from there, we're able to craft, as you'd expect, craft patient scenarios and questions that are relevant not only to the content, but that are cohesive and viable, and are questions that are representative of what you would expect to see on test day. So as far as how to become familiar with these NPTE scenario items, excuse me, maybe I should go back, post-edit that out. But when it comes to preparing for these items, probably the best thing you can do is enroll in our VIPT class. So the VIP class, or my VIPTs, this is where we go through, we spend tons of time in our live sessions going through practice questions. We show you what they're like, how to think through them, examples of the content that you'd likely experience. And as you review and review practice questions, this is what leads to the best performance on test day. In fact, when it comes to evidence-based study strategies, you'll find that practice questions, there's nothing that will compensate for lots and lots and lots of high-quality practice questions. And that's what we do in the VIP class, that VIP NPTE class. We go through all the content, not only content material, but also the items that are easily tested, and then help you review tons and tons and tons of practice questions. As you are reviewing these questions, the key is not to understand just the how or precisely what's happening, but understand the why behind these NPTE topics. So what does that mean? That means to understand, okay, for autonomic dysreflexia, I know that that's a blood pressure problem, but really understand why autonomic dysreflexia occurs. It's a dysreflexia between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems that is the tipping point Where things get out of calibration or out of equilibrium would be T6 and above. So if you have an injury at T6 or above, then you get the activation of sympathetic below the lesion, parasympathetic above, and the sympathetic overpowers it. And so that's why sitting the patient up is crucial. You can use gravity to pull some of the blood pressure out of the patient's head, just using gravity to your advantage. So that's an example of understanding the why behind NPTE topics. So the more you can do to move beyond just recognizing content to actually applying it and putting it into practice on not just on test questions, but in your patients, you'll find that that will lead to your best performance on test day. And in fact, over at PT Final Exam, we've been getting tons and tons of 800 or perfect scores on the exam with our students, simply because really it's nothing more than the students are understanding the why behind these questions so that they can more easily understand and dissect out the questions on test day. So that being said, when you want to become familiar with these NPTE style questions, you need to spend lots of time with them in order to clearly understand how they'll be asked, what type of information there will be, and then how you can apply that on test day. So just kind of the final take-home point here is that the content will be relatively unchanged. It's the format of the question that will continue, or that will be a little bit different with the scenario items. They will continue to have video and image-based items, so you can certainly plan on those continuing. It's just the addition of these scenario-based items that's causing people a little bit of heartburn. Just again, speaking very honestly, every time they change the content outline, there's always a dip in the pass rates. And that's number one, because ostensibly it's because people are not as familiar with the content or the content format in the scenario-based items in this example. And so it could result in a decrease in pass rate. That is why it is imperative to prepare well for these items so that you'll be ready for the 2024 administrations. All right, so with that, we'll bring it to a conclusion. Don't forget to go to ptfinalexam.com/podcast where you can register for that one-day event that's on November 18th. Be sure to check that out. Again, it's totally free to you. You just have to register. They're going to provide meals, parking, all of that. You just have to get yourself to Chicago. And so be sure to register for that. You'll find us there. Also check out ptfinalexam.com if you want to enroll in any of our VIP classes. We're just getting that started up for the 2024 administration. We've got tons and tons of practice questions to go through. I think you'll love it. Lots and lots and lots of good content. In fact, that's, I think, maybe the key to having a really good test performance is having a clear understanding of content and how to apply it on those questions. And that's what we do is in the VIP class, is just really in a concise and organized way, go through the content you need for the exam. So with that, we'll bring it to a conclusion. As always, thanks so much for hanging out with me on the podcast. Be sure to check out all the other episodes we've got. And in the meantime, stay safe, happy studying. I'll catch you in the next episode. Will Crane fist pumps all around.